The first red flag wasn't even red. It was beige. A new internal memo, buried under 6 layers of corporate lingo, declaring that legacy partnership structures will undergo branding reevaluation for investor readiness. Translation? They were coming for my clients, the ones I'd built from scratch, the ones I'd taken midnight calls for when their dashboards crashed during Black Friday, the ones who sent me Christmas cards with their dogs dressed like elves. I read that memo with the same expression I reserve for lukewarm chicken salad. Disappointed, not surprised. I'd been at Nexora for 8 years, long enough to know when a storm's coming, even if the skies still looked blue. The new storm wore too much cologne and said things like synergy loopbacks, with a straight face. His name was Chase, our founder's son, recently parachuted in with a smug grin and a LinkedIn profile that read like it was written by a hype man on Adderall. He was the kind of guy who'd use 3 slides to explain how to open Google Calendar. At first, I tried to be optimistic. I even smiled through the first 2 reorg meetings, thinking, okay, this is temporary. Just another phase. Seen it before. But the signs kept stacking. Operations stopped looping me into implementation check-ins. The marketing team forgot to include me in the press briefings. And Chase? He ghosted me more effectively than my college boyfriend after I mentioned student loan debt. You want to know the moment it truly sank in? It wasn't the memo. It wasn't the silence. It was the all hands when Chase announced a new client loyalty dashboard, flashing a graph that had one of my clients' logos pasted on it sideways. Sideways. The man couldn't even drag and drop in Canva correctly, and yet somehow he had the board eating out of his hand with fake charts and buzzwords. And hey, if you're 5 minutes into this story and already wondering how it ends, I promise, it's worth sticking around. If you enjoy a slow-burn corporate takedown seasoned with just the right amount of poetic justice, give this story a like and hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it really does keep our small but mighty team fueled on caffeine, sarcasm, and righteous rage. Anyway, back to Chase, the budget Napoleon with a god complex. He started holding invite-only brand alignment summits that coincidentally excluded anyone who'd been at the company more than a fiscal quarter. The whispers started right after. People in the finance team nudging me in the hallway like, hey, just so you know, we're consolidating legacy account leads. One even said, they're trying to decouple personalities from accounts. Translation, they wanted me out of the narrative before the IPO hype train really left the station. It got weirder. The founder, our original captain, now semi-retired, used to do monthly check-ins with me. They stopped. I emailed. No reply. Not even a cent from my iPhone. Just digital tumbleweeds. And Chase? He kept dodging my one-on-one requests like I was offering him a colonoscopy instead of a 15-minute sync. At one point, I walked into a strategy meeting uninvited and the room fell quiet like I was a ghost. Not even a seat at the table. Just a forced smile from a junior analyst who mouthed, I'm sorry, like I'd just walked in on my own eulogy. Still, I held my ground. I kept doing the work. Because that's the thing about being old guard. We don't need the spotlight to be effective. I knew the anchor client inside out. Their Q4 expansion goals, their procurement bottlenecks, even the CIO's golf handicap. I'd stayed up on vacation to debug their rollout. I'd sent their VP of Ops a condolence basket when his dog died. I was stitched into the fabric of their success. But Chase didn't see relationships. He saw logos on pitch decks. He thought slapping them into IPO materials without consent was just storytelling. I tried warning him, tried explaining that trust isn't a download metric. It's a living, breathing thing that takes years to build and minutes to nuke. He chuckled, said, Don't worry, Susan. The client's loyal to the brand, not you. And just like that, the storm clouds weren't on the horizon anymore. They were above my desk. I started documenting. Not out of paranoia, but protocol. When the tide turns, you either swim harder or grab a damn lifeboat. I chose the third option. I started mapping the island I'd escaped to. Quietly, strategically, and with one phone call that would start flipping every domino Chase didn't even know he'd set up. The boardroom still smelled like overpriced upholstery and self-importance. You know the kind. Leather chairs that squeak dramatically, like they're auditioning for a courtroom drama, and a long mahogany table no one uses except for passive-aggressive coffee placement. I'd been in that room for 8 years, every quarter, like clockwork. Strategy reviews used to feel like sparring matches, in a good way. Iron sharpening iron. Lately, they felt more like a sleepover where everyone knew a secret but me. Chase strutted in 10 minutes late, no laptop, Just that smug aura and a ceramic mug that said data-driven. He waited until we'd made it through the first hour. Market growth, pipeline status, expansion targets, before clearing his throat with the kind of theatrical pause that would have made a middle school drama teacher proud. "I want to acknowledge someone today," he said, eyes flicking toward me like a man tossing a grenade into a kiddie pool. "Susan has decided to step down from her role as VP of Strategic Partnerships to pursue personal opportunities." Silence. The kind that doesn't just fall, it crashes. I didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared straight ahead while the new blood around the table offered polite nods, like I'd announced I was going to start watercoloring in the Catskills or sell organic granola at farmers markets. One of the junior board members, a venture guy with hair like a hedgehog, muttered, "Oh wow, congrats, Susan." Another said, "Well earned," like I'd just been crowned prom queen instead of gutted mid-sentence. No one looked at me, except the founder. Harold. He was there, sort of. Semi-retired and slumped into his chair like gravity was stronger in that corner of the room. The man who'd built this company with calloused hands and late-night pizza. He didn't meet my eyes, just sipped his coffee and stared at the window behind me. Chase had neutered him, turned him into a cardboard cutout of company legacy. I used to look up to Harold. In that moment, I realized he wasn't a shield anymore. He was a prop. Then Chase said it, with a smirk so smug it should have been taxed. "The client is loyal to our brand, not her." It was surgical. Not loud, not cruel, just clinical. As if he were reading the expiration date on a bottle of milk. Not one person in that room challenged it, not even a raised brow. I'd never felt more erased by people who used to cheer when I walked in. I didn't flinch, didn't give him the goddamn satisfaction, but I memorized every face in that room, every folded hand, every fake smile, every silence. My response was simple. I took the packet of printed Q2 forecasts in front of me, turned to the last page, and under client risk factors, I added in pen, "Anchor relationship potentially volatile due to leadership transition." No one noticed. No one cared. They thought I was taking notes on my own burial. Chase moved on like he'd just announced a vending machine upgrade. "We'll be redistributing client portfolios under the new partner success framework," he said, which meant nothing but sounded shiny. There were nods, fake enthusiasm. One woman even clapped. I think she was scared she'd be next. I left the room 5 minutes later, excusing myself to make a call, and walked straight to the roof. The wind hit like reality, and I let myself feel it. Just for a minute. The betrayal. The professional murder dressed in corporate civility. They'd fired me without technically firing me. No severance, no press release. Just a clean PR lie about personal opportunities. I stared out at the skyline and let one sentence repeat in my mind like a prayer, or maybe a curse. The client is loyal to the brand, not her. Funny thing about loyalty, when you build it right, it doesn't die. It waits, and I knew exactly who to call next. It ended with a laminated folder and a woman named Trisha from HR who blinked too much. Not because she was nervous, because she was bored. Like she'd done this exact routine 7 times this week already, and I was just another speed bump on Chase's road to streamlining leadership structures. She handed me the folder with the smile of someone offering a child a flu shot. "Standard NDA," she chirped. Nothing unusual. I flipped through the pages like I was skimming a menu at a bad diner. Legalese dressed up like kindness. Don't sue us. Don't talk to the press. Don't breathe in a tone we dislike. No severance negotiation. Just a curt final paycheck and a vague transition plan that didn't exist. Trisha leaned forward like she was giving me a tip on good Thai food. Chase wanted to make this graceful. You know, quiet. Quiet. That's corporate speak for we don't want to admit what we just did. I signed the NDA with the same pen I'd used in that board meeting. Silver ink, smooth glide. A gift from the anchor client, years ago. I left the pen on the table when I stood. Just a little rebellion. Let Chase buy his own damn stationery. By Monday morning, my access was gone. Email dead. Slack wiped. Badge disabled. No goodbye post. No exit interview. Just a void where my career had stood for 8 years. The kind of void that echoes. I went home and sat on the floor for 3 hours, listening to the dishwasher run, just so something in my life still sounded productive. On Wednesday, my phone rang. Not my work phone. My personal cell. Number only a few clients had. Caller ID, M. Halverson. My heart kicked in my chest. The new CIO, anchor client. I picked up and said her name before she said mine. Hey, Michelle. There was a pause, then her voice, sharp and low. Why am I finding out from LinkedIn that you're gone? I swallowed the bitterness. Guess you didn't get the new loyalty dashboard memo. She didn't laugh. Chase hasn't returned a single email in 2 weeks. His assistant told us new client success workflows are being piloted. I waited. Then she said the line that snapped the pieces into motion. We're reevaluating our vendor stack this quarter anyway. Budget cuts. You free for coffee? I don't remember what I said. Something neutral. But inside, something clicked. 3 moves ahead. I could already see the boardroom's polished table cracking down the center. The timing wasn't just poetic. It was strategic. We met Friday, corner booth. No eye contact at first. Just small talk. I let her vent. She hated Chase. Said he presented to their exec team like he was auditioning for a startup reality show. Didn't know their roadmap. Didn't even pronounce their CTO's name right. He called her Marina, Michelle said, deadpan. Her name is Marina. He didn't correct himself once. I sipped my coffee and let her talk. Eventually, she got to the meat of it. We've been with Nexora for 6 years, she said. Your team built every integration from scratch. No one else gave us that kind of attention. Chase acts like we're lucky to be in your portfolio. I nodded slowly. That's a shift. She leaned forward. Off the record, if we needed to explore options, would you know who to talk to? That was the moment. Right there. The old life died. The new one opened its eyes. I might, I said, voice calm as glass. She didn't press. Didn't need to. The next morning, I opened a private spreadsheet, made 2 tabs. One titled Anchor Transition Plan. The other, Competitor Contacts. And just like that, the quiet little exit they thought would vanish into HR paperwork, it became a countdown. And no one, not even Chase, could hear the clock ticking. I didn't wear a wire, but it sure felt like I should have. Every meeting, every message, every shared doc was wrapped in quiet code. No names, no direct references to Nexora, no paper trail. Just the platform, the vendor, the transition model. Michelle was meticulous about it. So was I. This wasn't some angry ex-employee smear job. This was reconnaissance, precision, and the stakes were tectonic. Officially, I was just an industry contact giving third-party insights. Unofficially, I was the ghost in the server room, showing them where all the wires really ran. The audit kicked off 2 weeks after our coffee. Michelle looped me in under the radar. Private video calls on her personal device. After hours, webcam pointed just slightly off-center so it never showed her face too clearly. Just in case, she said once. You never know who's watching. They'd been toying with a vendor evaluation already. Internal grumblings about bloat, inflexibility, opaque support tickets. Chase's arrival had only accelerated the rot. They felt ignored, taken for granted. Even the analytics suite, one I'd personally helped customize, had reverted to generic dashboards, stripping away months of use case refinements. It wasn't just inefficient, it was insulting. They demoed 3 alternatives. One was a flashy new unicorn that looked great until it couldn't integrate with half their legacy tools. The second had decent features, but was run by a VC-backed frat house that treated support like a social experiment. And then there was Bravura. Bravura wasn't the biggest, but they were clean, ethical. Their founder still took customer calls himself. No scandals, no bait and switches, just product that worked and a team that actually listened. I'd met their founder once, 6 years ago, at a conference booth crammed between an AI smoothie startup and a company that sold smart staplers. He wore jeans, answered every question without jargon, and refused to talk about funding rounds. I remembered thinking, if I ever jump ship, I'm calling him. So I did. Sent a short message. He replied within the hour. Of course I remember you. Let's talk. He didn't ask what happened at Nexora, just asked what the client needed and whether they were serious about moving. I told him the truth. They were. Very. But they needed quiet, a full roadmap, and 0 leaks. Understood, he said. Let me loop in my head of integration. We'll keep it to 3 people. NDA on our side. Silent mode. That's when the real work began. Michelle and I drafted the first framework on a Saturday afternoon. A clean 30-day transition plan with phased architecture, client-side sandbox testing, and fallbacks. She looped in 2 senior engineers under code names. I reviewed their legacy schema, matched API endpoints manually, and even suggested a few performance tweaks Bravura hadn't thought of yet. Every recommendation I made, I justified with data. But underneath the charts and feature matrices, something darker hummed. I never said the word revenge, but it sat beside me like a quiet shadow, watching me type. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about balance. Justice by architecture. At one point, Michelle looked over the roadmap and asked, "Is this really doable in a month?" "If you don't sleep much," I said, "and if no one screws up." She smiled. "Then let's not screw up." A week later, Bravura sent a deployment dummy to test legacy data porting. It ran flawlessly. One of the engineers on the anchor client's side messaged me directly after, "This is the first time I've seen something work right the first try. Feels like cheating." It wasn't cheating. It was what happens when people care. By the end of the second week, we had 2 versions of the roadmap, one theoretical, one executable. We made a quiet pact. The switch would happen on IPO day. Not before, not after. When the spotlight was brightest on Nexora, the anchor client would ghost them live. No press release, just absence. No fireworks, no press conferences. Just one platform offline, another online, and a few subtle pins on lapels that would say everything without a single word. And still, Chase had no idea. He was too busy selling a future that no longer existed. They put my name in a press packet. Not directly, of course. They were slicker than that. But when Nexora's IPO roadshow hit full throttle and the first round of investor materials dropped, there it was, my legacy client's logo, front and center, beneath a headline that screamed "Partnership Strength Built to Scale." And just below that, a quote lifted straight from a status meeting I led 2 years ago, word for word, like they owned it. Chase strutted through his media blitz like a man who'd never seen a bridge burn behind him. CNBC, Tech Circuit, even a half-baked podcast that spent 20 minutes asking him how he balances visionary disruption with leadership mindfulness. His answers were canned. Corporate haikus with too many buzzwords and not a single ounce of operational knowledge. But it didn't matter. The markets love a clean narrative, and Chase gave them one. Founder's son reinvents startup, clients thriving, IPO imminent. He pitched my client, as the cornerstone of Nexora's next phase. Said they'd committed to scale with us through Q4 and beyond. I almost laughed. Not because it was bold, because it was lazy. Chase thought if he said it with confidence, the market would just clap and nod. Never mind that the anchor client hadn't signed a renewal. Never mind that they'd already pulled read access from Nexora's internal API last week. Never mind that they were 2 weeks from pulling the plug. Michelle called me the night after the Tech Circuit article went live. "He just told the press we're deepening our integration. We haven't spoken to him in a month." "I know," I said. She sighed. "We need to move." "On schedule," I said. "No earlier." We both understood why. Timing was everything. If they flipped before the IPO, Chase could pivot, spin it. Say they were always phasing out old contracts. But if they waited, if they pulled their presence during the bell ringing, there'd be no time to reframe. No elegant exit. Just a live implosion. Still, it burned. Watching Chase walk through glass doors into studios I used to brief. Smirking like he built the trust I'd handcrafted over late-night calls and product triage sprints. It burned watching him wrap himself in my clients like a trophy coat, showing off something he didn't earn and couldn't maintain. Then came the call from Bloomberg. Blocked number. Female voice. Cool, clipped, curious. "Hi, Susan. I'm with Bloomberg Business. We're doing background on Nexora's IPO run. Off the record. We're hearing the anchor account might be shopping around. Any comment?" I could feel the heat rise up my spine. Not panic, not guilt. Just the spark of something feral and focused. I didn't ask who her source was. I didn't deny. I didn't flinch. I just said, "No comment, but watch the bell." She was silent for a beat. Then, "Got it." Click. I set my phone down and stared at the wall. Chase had built his castle on sand, then turned up the volume and prayed no one noticed the tide. The press loved his smile, his bullet points, his pretty slides, but they hadn't seen what I'd seen, the rot underneath. Every overpromise, every neglected renewal, Every silent client slipping out the back while he chased headlines up front. This wasn't sabotage. I wasn't pulling strings or leaking emails or planting stories. I wasn't some cartoon villain in a pantsuit, whispering in dark corners. All I'd done was listen, guide, offer better options. If Chase was about to implode, it wouldn't be because I pushed. It'd be because he never looked down. The signatures came through at 11:47 a.m. on a rainy Thursday, buried inside a zipped folder titled Q3 Optimization Contract Review. That was our code. Inside it, the full executed agreement with bravura, time-stamped and final. It was done. The anchor client, Nexora's most visible, most weaponized name, had officially defected. Quietly, cleanly. No fireworks. Just a contractual guillotine Chase wouldn't see until the blade had already dropped. Michelle forwarded me the receipt with a single line of text. We go live Monday. You good? I stared at it longer than I should have. The satisfaction wasn't loud. It was clinical. Cold clarity, like a scalpel sliding through fabric. I typed back, perfectly good. Be early. Wear the pin. We'd talked about the pins weeks ago. Bravura's new branding campaign had these sleek black and silver lapel pins with a minimalist logo, barely visible unless you knew what you were looking for. Michelle ordered them for her team with express shipping. No one would say a word. No one needed to. They'd just stand there, in the right place, at the right time, and the message would write itself. That night, I got a call from Bravura's founder. You never asked for anything, he said, but we'd like to offer you a formal advisory role. Quiet, flexible, no org chart. Just show up when we need someone smart. He didn't say, as a thank you. He didn't need to. I paused just long enough to feel the shift under my feet. I accept, I said. Just keep my name out of the press. Always. We hung up, and I sat in the dark for a while, watching the window as the city lights blurred with rain. This was what power felt like. Not noise, not headlines. Just control. A well-lit hallway where every door opened because you picked the lock quietly, months ago. I spent the weekend coaching Michelle's team through the final motions. Unpairing integrations, decoupling user access tokens, flagging legacy scripts for shutdown. Not sabotage. Just a clean, surgical uncoupling of a relationship that had already died the moment Chase uttered those fateful words in that boardroom. The client is loyal to our brand, not her. Funny how brand loyalty doesn't hold up when the face of the brand doesn't know your industry, your infrastructure, or your name. Every step of the exit plan had a dual purpose. Decommissioning Nexora without triggering alerts, and onboarding Bravura so smoothly that no one from legal or IT on either side would flinch. I trained their ops lead on how to phrase internal memos so they wouldn't trip compliance alarms. I wrote email drafts for department heads that sounded like routine optimization updates. At one point, I even helped rewrite one of Bravura's onboarding scripts so it mimicked Nexora's interface down to the font spacing, just enough to keep casual users from panicking. Transition isn't about force. It's about frictionless movement, like a knife sliding between ribs without hitting bone. By Sunday night, the anchor client's entire user base had been migrated in shadow mode. All that remained was the flip. Activation set to coincide with Nexora's IPO bell, not a second before. That Monday would be all cameras, confetti, and stock tickers. And while Chase stood under the bright lights, grinning like he'd just reinvented the wheel, Michelle and her team would be there too, standing quietly on the edges of the celebration in crisp suits and those silent little pins, watching the spectacle unfold with the stillness of people who already knew how the story ended. No press release, no warning shot, just a vanished logo, an empty partnership page, and a competitor's presence in the one place Chase thought he controlled. And him? He still had no idea. He was too busy rehearsing sound bites. The invite came on Friday. Subject line: Legacy Team, IPO participation and bell ceremony access. No note, no signature, just a blocky PDF with a QR code and a dress code suggestion. Smart formal, no dark denim. I stared at it like it might explode. I didn't know if it was an oversight, a courtesy, or a setup. Maybe someone on the comms team hadn't purged the old guard list. Maybe Chase wanted to parade his success in front of the people he stepped over. Or maybe, just maybe, he was arrogant enough to believe I posed no threat at all. By Sunday night, I'd picked out a gray wrap dress that made me look approachable but unreadable. My heels were polished. My nails were bare. I wore no jewelry except a small pin on my jacket. Nothing branded. Just a silver circle. I didn't want to outshine the moment. I wanted to absorb it, like a mirror catching the last flash before the bulb burned out. The ceremony was held downtown, in a rented hall with crystal chandeliers and screens looping highlight reels of Nexora's journey to IPO. It looked like a wedding video shot by a tech bro. Cue music, logos dissolving into each other, phrases like trusted innovation and scalable partnerships floating over fake B-roll of smiling engineers who didn't work there anymore. I walked in through a side entrance, badge scanned by a disinterested intern. No one stopped me. No one asked why I was there. I drifted toward the back of the room, where the light was softer and the handshakes fewer. Chase was up front, holding court like a preacher at a country club revival, grinning wide, working the crowd, hugging people like he'd just returned from war. He wore a slate blue suit that probably cost more than my first car, but his posture was off, shoulders too tight, eyes scanning the room between laughs. He saw me. Of course he did. His smile didn't drop, but it didn't widen either. It just paused, one beat too long. Then he looked away, back to the safety of new board members and venture capitalists who still believed in his slideshow gospel. I didn't move closer, didn't wave. I just stood near the refreshment table, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching people orbit him like he was the sun. But the real heat was still outside the building, until it wasn't. At 9:08 a.m., the anchor client arrived. 3 execs, one in navy, one in maroon, one in a light gray suit that caught the room's attention immediately, not because of who wore it, but because of what was pinned just above the breast pocket. Bravura's logo. Small, tasteful, matte black, not screaming, whispering. The other 2 had matching pins. They didn't rush the stage. They didn't join the crowd. They positioned themselves along the left side of the room, just close enough to be seen, just far enough to remain distinct. A comms intern handed them programs, clearly unaware. They nodded politely, smiled like everything was normal, and stood in perfect silence. I held my breath, because this was the moment I hadn't been able to plan for. How would it land? Would people notice? Would someone from the investor side recognize the logo? Would Chase? The lighting shifted as the production crew prepared for the bell-ringing livestream. The anchor client execs remained still, statues in a room of motion. One sipped from a tiny branded water bottle. Another glanced at her watch. I felt the adrenaline spike behind my ribs. Not fear, not guilt, just power. Raw, surging awareness that everything was now balanced on a hair. A logo. A glance. A pause on camera long enough to invite a question. Chase adjusted his tie, patted the podium, laughed too loud at something someone whispered. He didn't look left. He didn't dare look left, because deep down, he knew. And I didn't need to say a single word. She had the kind of camera that meant business. Not a phone, not a touristy DSLR, a real rig, matte black and humming faintly with heat, perched on her shoulder like it knew secrets. She'd been working the room casually all morning, capturing B-roll of smiles, handshakes, awkward laughter from men who thought they were important. The Bloomberg patch on her mic was subtle, but I saw it. So did the Bravura execs. One of them turned slightly toward her, not enough to pose, just enough to be visible. The lapel pin caught the light for exactly half a second. And that's all it took. The reporter paused, squinted, lifted the viewfinder, zoomed. I watched the moment hit her, the slow blink, the exhale through her nose. She steadied the shot, panned left to catch the second pin, then the third. No one flinched. They weren't hiding. They just stood there like diplomats at a funeral, stoic, untouchable, immune. She lowered the camera and turned to the guy next to her, a man in a blazer 3 sizes too big, holding a clipboard and chewing gum like it was his last link to reality. "Kill the story," she said flatly. He looked at her, confused. "What?" She didn't even look back at the stage. The anchor investor just pulled out. He froze, gum paused mid-chew. "Are you sure?" She just nodded, the kind of nod that doesn't leave room for debate. Then everything started tilting. I saw it ripple through the room in slow, beautiful waves. One investor furrowed his brow. Another glanced at his phone, then back at the Bravura pins. A junior associate whispered something to her boss and was immediately shushed, too late. The air changed, went sharp. Too quiet. Like the oxygen had been pulled from the room and replaced with electricity. And then came the whisper. It started somewhere to the left of Chase, a lean man with a Bluetooth earpiece and panic blooming in his expression. He leaned in, said something into Chase's ear that made the smile falter. Not fall, not yet. Just skip, like a scratched CD. Chase's head tilted a degree to the left. His eyes flicked, barely, to the bravura team. He didn't speak, didn't blink, but his jaw set, hard. That was the tell. The panic wasn't loud, it was internal combustion. You could see him calculating, is this a stunt? A mistake? Did legal miss something? Am I about to be blindsided on live television? I stood near the back, coffee in hand, posture loose. Not smiling, not smirking, just watching. He scanned the crowd like a drowning man looking for land, trying to find anyone, anything to signal this was still under control. But there were no lifelines, only faces, watching, waiting, noticing. The Bloomberg reporter had already packed up her gear. Her camera crew followed her out like a funeral procession. Chase's hand dropped from the podium. He leaned over to whisper something to his COO, but the man was already 2 steps behind, staring down at his phone in horror. The screen reflected in his glasses. Probably Slack blowing up, inbox hemorrhaging, someone from finance typing in all caps. The bell ceremony hadn't even started yet. And the narrative? Already shattered. He still had to go through the motions, smile for the cameras, thank the board, lift that stupid ceremonial gavel like he wasn't bleeding out in real time. But anyone who knew what they were looking at could already see the ruin under the polish. And me? I didn't need a headline, didn't need a podium. I just needed to stand there, steady and still, as the machine began to eat itself alive. Power doesn't always scream. Sometimes it watches. Chase stood center stage, flanked by the board like a man trying to look regal on a crumbling float. The bell was oversized, gleaming, obnoxious. Cameras flashed, live stream counters ticked up. Somewhere, confetti cannons were being prepped backstage like it was the Macy's Day Parade for egos. The host gave a practiced intro. A new era in scalable innovation, customer-centric momentum, transformational leadership, and then motioned for Chase to take the gavel. He gripped it like he wasn't sure if he should ring a bell or bash in the truth. I watched from the wings. The bravura execs stood a few feet ahead of me, still statues in their tailored suits, hands folded, lapel pins catching just enough light to whisper the story before the bell ever could. Chase cleared his throat, smiled, lifted the gavel, and dropped it. Not far. Just enough to clatter. Enough to send a hollow clang through the mic feed, sharp and awkward and perfect. His smile stuttered, split-second panic, but he recovered, laughed too loudly, grabbed it again. The audience offered a chuckle, confused, like they weren't sure if they were witnessing a human moment or the beginning of a car crash. He raised it again and rang the bell. The clang was theatrical, empty. It echoed. The live stream rolled on, stock ticker bar crawling across the bottom like a worm on hot pavement. The bell rang, the applause hit, and somewhere in the middle of it, I saw movement. Maroon suit, bravura pin. The anchor client's executive, Michelle's boss, stepped down from the back row of the stage and walked toward the elevators. Not rushed, not sneaky, deliberate. As he passed through the crowd, he leaned in and said something, quiet, but caught on a stray mic, to a man in a charcoal suit. Bravura's founder. They didn't shake hands, just a whisper, a nod, and then the elevator doors opened and swallowed them both. That was it. That was the broadcasted obituary. Within 5 minutes, Bloomberg's site pulled the highlight reel. CNBC didn't rerun the segment. By the time Chase made it to the green room, 3 investors had already canceled interviews. By lunch, Slack channels across half the enterprise clients were buzzing. Did the anchor flip? Why was Bravura there? Was that a setup? The stock opened soft. Trading volume spiked, but not the way they wanted. Sell orders trickled like a leaky faucet, then gushed. Someone tweeted a clip of the dropped gavel with the caption, "Symbolism much?" By 3 p.m., the board went into emergency session. The head of finance stopped returning Chase's calls. The CMO locked her calendar. HR put a hiring freeze on executive recruiting until further notice. And Harold, the founder, the man who once called me the heart of the client portfolio, called. He didn't waste time. Was it you? I looked out the window of my apartment, phone cradled against my cheek like it weighed nothing at all. I didn't do anything, Harold. Pause. Static. I see, he said. And in those 2 words, he told me everything. He knew. The board knew. Every single executive in the room knew what had happened, even if they couldn't prove it. Even if there'd be no lawsuit, no press release, no name in the trades. They knew who flipped the game. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need headlines. I got something cleaner. Better. As the market spun and Chase's legacy shattered on live television, I sat in quiet stillness, sipping cold coffee and watching the city blink under a gray sky. My name wasn't in the story, but it was written between every line.